At that moment, I had never been so appreciative of my grandparents teaching me to play poker. I frowned and looked upward to the left, acting like I was trying to remember. I told them I had gotten it, but that I had marked it as spam and deleted it. "Would you mind showing us?" one of them asked. He smiled and took his sunglasses off, probably in an attempt to appear more cordial. The second kept his sunglasses on, which made it impossible to see where he was looking. "If we don't ask, our bosses are guaranteed to give us hell for it," No Sunglasses said. I agreed and logged into my university email. I pulled up the trash folder and showed them the apparently unread email. "We really do apologize for this," the first man said. "We've been installing new internal servers and we've been having trouble with stored addresses and queuing emails. The new system is meant to automatically find the correct email address, but it's been attaching wrong domain names to IDs that are close." They watched as I deleted it totally and seemed content. Each of them shook my hand, reminded me that the email was under corporate non-disclosure, and walked out. As soon as they were gone, I shut the door and collapsed into the chair at the computer. What kind of company was this? How in the world did they find me, find where I worked, and sent people in less than 24 hours? I looked at the USB stick in my bag, but I didn't touch it. In some weird way, I worried that I had damned myself with it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it would end up being more important than not. I finished up my workday and headed home. The next day was Saturday, and we needed to mow the grass. While some of you might think, why would mowing the grass take a whole day? I can only respond by saying that one of the downsides of having land is taking care of it. We had 2 tractors so that Faye and I could mow at the same time and finish in as little time as required. Before I explain what happened that Saturday, I need you to understand something. Without fail, I serviced those tractors every time after we used them. I cleaned the mower decks, sharpened the blades when they needed it, and double-checked the engine. I checked oil and gas before and after using them. Yes, I'm a little OCD, but it's been of more help than harm. Faye and I typically use the same tractor, but she had told me that her tractor felt like it was pulling to the left instead of going straight ahead. I told her to use mine and that I would check it out. She started the tractor and began to mow our field. The tractor worked fine for about 15 minutes. Then the engine began to sputter and cough. I noticed it and waved for Faye to stop. She did, shutting the tractor off and starting to walk towards me. That's when several things happened all at once. I stood up, walking to meet my wife halfway. Faye walked towards me smiling. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark maroon sedan slow down as it drove past our house. The tractor exploded behind my wife into a fireball. Pieces of metal and rubber flew in every direction, and the shockwave knocked Faye forward onto the ground. The blast of heat hit me full in the face, and I felt like I had dropped face first into a bonfire. I ran to her, scared shitless. She was fine, though the wind had been knocked out of her. I moved her to the garage, told her to call 911, and ran back to the burning husk of tractor with a fire extinguisher. I used the entire extinguisher, but I couldn't get the blaze to totally stop. The next few hours were a blur. The fire department showed up, followed by the police. The neighbors gawked from their front porches, and we were asked the same questions again and again. The cops asked if either of us had any reason to suspect foul play. God help me, I should have mentioned the meeting with the 2 men at work in the email, but I kept my mouth shut. What would I have said anyway? "Well, gee officer, I received an email last night from a company making a biological weapon out of Ebola, and today 2 men in dark suits showed up at work to ask me about it in a vaguely threatening manner." I would have laughed at that myself had someone else said it. By the time everyone had left, we were exhausted and starving. We loaded up the puppy into my car and went to Faye's parents' place, where her dad cooked on the grill and I got lectured on the importance of taking care of my tools. Thing is, I did. I still do. There was no reason for that tractor to explode. After dinner, we went back to our home. There was a huge circle of blackened dirt and burnt grass in the field where the tractor had exploded, but otherwise there was no sign of the circus that had filled our lives only a few hours earlier. Faye was exhausted, and she went straight to bed. But me? I couldn't sleep. I kept running over every check to the tractor I had done, trying to see where I could have gone wrong. The fuel lines weren't loose, no matter what my father-in-law insinuated. There had been no reason for it to explode. Now properly feeling my paranoia, I needed to double-check the other major property that I gave my OCD an outlet on. The guns. Yes, I owned guns. I grew up around them, and they're only tools. Treat it with the proper respect, and there's nothing inherently wrong with them. We had a shotgun in the living room, on top of the television stand. There was a handgun in the kitchen, a holster screwed into the bottom of the cupboards behind the fluorescent light for the counter, and a revolver my wife kept on her nightstand. Lastly, I kept a mare's leg in the basement, hidden in the pantry behind rows of mason jars filled with pears and peaches. I cleaned these every Sunday, disassembling them and making sure that they were in order. As I walked through the house checking each gun, I noticed the firing pins were missing. Let me repeat that. The firing pins, from the guns I cleaned every Sunday like clockwork, were missing. The only gun that hadn't been tampered with was the mare's leg downstairs. The lines of dust hadn't even been disrupted, and the gun was still able to fire without complications. I went back upstairs and sat in the living room, trying to let my wife rest while I had a panic breakdown. In the span of less than 24 hours, I had learned a company was apparently making a biological Ebola weapon, been confronted by men in suits who claimed to represent said company, had one of my tractors explode nearly killing my wife, and had come home to find someone had tampered with my belongings in an attempt to make me unable to defend myself. What the fuck was going on here? My first concern was for Faye. Was someone targeting both of us? Or was it just her? How would I be able to protect her? I thought back over the day and remembered the maroon sedan that had been driving past when the tractor exploded. There was nothing noteworthy about it, but an instinct told me to watch for it again. I added gun shop to the errand list on the fridge and went to sleep, resolving to keep an eye out for the sedan. It didn't help. Over the next weeks, I recognized a pattern of 3 distinct cars following my wife and I around town. There was a black Honda, the maroon sedan, and a dark blue motorcycle. When I would take the puppy out, one would inevitably drive down the road while I was outside. When we would go to the movies, one would be parked within 5 spaces of our car. I even started to notice them at family gatherings, driving past when one of my cousins had a birthday party, or when we visited Faye's grandmother at the nursing home. At the same time, more accidents began to occur around our home. The heat would miraculously go out, only for a repairman to come and say that we lucked out. Because if I hadn't come when I did, you'd have a pretty serious buildup of carbon monoxide here. The springs on the garage doors suddenly began failing, almost crushing the puppy when I was working outside. The power brakes went out of my car, forcing me to cruise down the breakdown lane on the highway until I eased to a stop and put the emergency brake on. Did they know, somehow, that I had downloaded that information and kept it? Were these really accidents or attempts on my life? After 3 weeks of this, I got out of bed in the middle of the night and checked the guns again. No missing pieces, and I sat in the dark to think. Deleting the information wouldn't help. If they knew I had it, they wouldn't know I deleted it. If push came to shove, it was the only leverage I had. The email had come to me by mistake, so it wouldn't be logical to assume Faye had read it. She had been on the tractor I usually used when it exploded. It was clear to me that I had been meant to be on it, not her. The accidents had only started around the house since the visit by the 2 men, Reen and Froll. I hadn't seen them again in person, but the trio of vehicles were ever present. A real part of me wanted to take my guns and go hunting, but this wasn't the Wild West. I wasn't going to risk someone getting shot in crossfire, and I wasn't sure if the police would accept my story. If this company had the capacity to find me in less than 24 hours, how could I be sure they wouldn't fabricate evidence against me? Should I tell Faye about all this? She was my wife, my partner. I knew she'd be in my corner 100%, but I couldn't risk her safety. Looking back, I know this sounds chauvinist. I'm not. Faye was far more talented than I was in a lot of areas. But I was raised to believe that a man protects his family, no matter what. Discounting the problems with the ventilation systems, everything that had happened was directed at me. If I told her, she'd become as legitimate a target as I apparently was. As long as these people kept trying to proactively silence a leak, I suppose would be their way of saying it, my wife was in danger of being collateral damage. Her remaining that way was not an option, and I had to think of a way to ensure her safety permanently. I was out of options, at least the ones that left me in a position I wanted to be in, namely with my wife, safe in the life we had built. The only option I had left that would keep me alive and keep my wife and family safe was one I didn't want to do. I had to disappear, vanish out of the clear blue sky, and make it as close to impossible as I could to follow me. Once I was off the grid, I could find a way to either expose the company or make some kind of a deal with them. I couldn't expect Faye to follow me, nor would I want to expose her to that level of danger. I would have to abandon the love of my life and every accomplishment I had earned in order to survive this, at least temporarily. I was so fucked.